Gen Z is the most diverse generation to date, and they expect that reflection in the content that they're going to be hearing about at events. So they want that diversity in speakers and in content. All right. Well, welcome, Kara. It's exciting to sit down and have this conversation with you. We are talking about something that I think is going to be really interesting to touch on, and that is the Gen Z effect. So how we are transforming the corporate event planning workplace to meet the expectations and the agenda that Gen Z brings to the table, and how we're kind of navigating those changing dynamics, right? So super excited to sit down and have a conversation with you about that. And let's kick it off.
Awesome. So I guess we need to probably start by defining the different generations that we're going to be talking through today. So walk us through really the primary ones that are in our events right now, which are Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X, because baby boomers probably are really starting to phase out.
The way we kind of are going to define it for this episode is Gen X is 1965 to 1980. Millennials are that 1981 to 1996. And then Gen Z, the kind of key topic that we're talking about today, is 1997 to 2012. So we're really spanning a huge amount of years, and obviously expectations and all of the perspectives of these different generations. It's a wide swath, right?
Absolutely. And I think, decision makers sometimes are still the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, and they're planning events for their audience, which isn't necessarily going to keep them up with the times and continue to generate results that they're looking for. So when we look ahead, a statistic that I've, thought is pretty mind blowing is by 2030, the workforce is going to be made up of 35% Gen Z, 40% millennial, 20% Gen X, and only 5% boomers. And that's only 5 years from now. So we really need to start shifting our gears when we plan events to be focused on the millennial and the Gen Z audience, because they're not the same audience as the boomers and the Gen Xers. And candidly, they're not the same as each other either. There's a lot of differences between millennials and Gen Zers as well. So I had a couple of really interesting conversations with some of the Gen Zers on my team that I have the pleasure of working with every day, which, I think about how when we originally used to set up sort of mentors and mentorships, we would align these younger folks in the workforce with older folks in the workforce. But now the older folks want to be aligned with the younger folks because they want the reverse mentorship that happens by learning from that Gen Z audience. So I sort of allowed myself to get that reverse mentorship in a couple of conversations recently, and really understanding what the Gen Zer wants in an event. And when they have choices, because we all know there are a lot of events that people could attend nowadays, and they're starting to get the opportunity in their careers to attend more things, what makes them make the decision to say yes to one event over another? And when they get to that event, what makes them reflect and say that was a good use of my time versus it wasn't? And some of the things that came out I found most interesting were really about the in the decision on whether they should attend the event. The destination of the event really held a very high regard for the folks that I was talking to. They want to travel. They want to see what's out there and experience destinations. They want to go to new venues they haven't been to. They want to go to new cities they haven't been to. And they want to find those, social media moments in those destinations that they can really hang on to. So if they're considering between two conferences that feel very similar and there's a big keynote speaker, they don't really care about the keynote speaker so much as where is that destination that event is taking place in. So I thought that was a really interesting shift. And as so much of our business relies on the destination to which you travel, it's a really interesting shift to say what destinations are trending for Gen Z and what is just, I want to check this off my bucket list. So I'm going to attend the event no matter what's happening at the event. And maybe you can shift your spend from that big keynote to something a little bit more experiential at that event. So have you seen anything, Ashley, in regards to decision-making about what event to attend from a Gen Z perspective?
Some of the conversations that I've had too, it's that emphasis on those interactive experiences. They want something that's hands-on. They want opportunities to network and collaborate and have conversations. And then also I think too, it's that tech integration. So, any way that you can infuse technology into an event is going to appeal to the Gen Z demographic. And then, I think it's a good point. The keynote speaker may not matter, but when we do have a keynote speaker that does need to really draw in the Gen Z demographic, I think the key is, diversity and inclusion. Gen Z is the most diverse generation to date, and they expect that reflection in the content that they're going to be hearing about at events. So they want that diversity in speakers and in content. So those were kind of three of the key things that I heard as I was having conversations that I thought were really interesting. And I think the other thing too, and we can kind of touch on this when we dive into, Gen Z in the workforce, is that flexibility, right? They want to be able to have flexibility at events, have the ability to have that downtime to explore the destination that they're in, and to really, add that value to attending. And that flexibility is really key as well. So.
Absolutely. Work-life balance has a whole new meaning to the Gen Z era. And I think that, that is more than just, can I work from home or not, right? People just think, is it about having a flexible schedule? That's part of it. I do think that that's relevant, but it's also, is the business I'm working for, serving a purpose for me? Am I feeling valued? Do I want to stay at work extra because something that they're doing is going to make a difference? And, a passion project that I have or something of that nature. And how flexible is it? So when I do have something that I need to attend somewhere else outside of the workplace, am I going to be reprimanded for that? Or am I going to be encouraged to continue to grow? I mean, we're in the gig economy. The Gen Zers have side hustles like I've never seen before. And they want to be able to make sure that their careers are continuing to grow them, but also the things that bring them joy outside of their day-to-day work continues to grow for them as well. So, something you mentioned before, Ashley, was about, the content around, what the Gen Zers are looking for. And I thought it was really interesting. The big names and the big celebrities that used to draw attendance at an event aren't the same celebrities for a boomer, a Gen Xer, a millennial, or a Gen Z. The Gen Zers want the content creators on stage. They don't care about that TV personality so much as they care about somebody that they follow on social media. The Gen Xers still want the industry experts. They want that person that has all the data-driven results on their particular topic. So when I think about that, I think about one of the most phenomenal event marketers, Julius Solaris, who I follow regularly, and I think I've mentioned him before. And he put out a really interesting study about planning events for the different generations. He focused on Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs, and he went through all the different sectors of an event, for lack of better words, and talked about how the different generations like to receive that information or be about that aspect of the event. So I'd like to have a little fun with this, Ashley.
Okay. Okay.
Your generational knowledge and bring up a couple of the topics that he mentioned. And I'm going to ask you to guess, was this Gen X, millennial, or Gen Z, and how they like to see things? And let's see what you got. Okay.
I like this. Okay. Let's kick it off.
Let's start with communication style. Which generation prefers push notifications as how they receive communication around an active event?
Oh, I'm going to say Gen Z on that one.
No, not
really. So I figured for the flexibility side of things, that would be the perfect answer. So tell me why.
So believe it or not, first of all, the Gen Xers prefer email updates. We know that they live and breathe by their email. They were the first to really spend most of their workday around email. The millennials want the push notifications. They want it to pop right up. They don't want to have to find it. Convenience is important to them. But what Gen Zers want is real-time social updates. They're already on social media wondering who's going to tell me what's going on next. I want the live Instagram stories. I want the TikTok that tells me where I should be and when at this event and where the really cool things are happening. And I'm going to be much more apt to follow along what they say than a push notification that says the buses are leaving in 15 minutes. So I thought that was an interesting difference between the generations and communication style. And that is really important for planners to know as they think about how to set themselves up for upcoming events. So let's talk about Registration forms. That's sort of a hot topic because sometimes you see a registration form that has 100 questions on it. Sometimes there is 3 questions on it, and sometimes they're somewhere in the middle. What information do you think that the Gen Zer would like to provide in registration?
I would say as little information as possible.
You're absolutely right. So all they really want to do is the name, email, and payment. And that's it. So millennials are willing to go up to 3 screens. So, I answered 5 questions, submit, answered another 5 questions, submit. And once they get past 3 screens, millennials are moving on. That's too much work for me. And Gen Xers will spend all day long registering for their event. They'll tell you their favorite food and everything along the way. But Gen Zers are like, hey, we'll cover all that stuff when I get there. Just cover me. And you know what I think is also interesting about that is they provide you with the payment. And then later on, when you want to add something on, they expect you to have that payment still on hand. So the gripe with the Gen Zer is when you're on site at an event and you actually have to pull out a credit card. You didn't just save my information. You didn't just add it to my balance. You didn't just use a digital form of payment that I'd already provided to close out an add-on. So when you're thinking about how you're going to upsell to a Gen Zer on site at an event, make it seamless for them. Do not make it something where they have to even open their wallet or their credit card. It's all on their phone anyways. So that's kind of a fun tip, I guess, for when you're planning with a Gen Z heavy audience.
Love that.
All right.
All about the convenience, right?
Absolutely. All right. Let's talk about session length. I'm going to give you an opportunity to free answer here. Tell me what you think the acceptable or maximum session length time would be for each generation. And we're talking keynote or breakout session. Doesn't really matter because session length is a session, in my opinion.
Okay. I'm going to go 30 minutes for the Gen Zer, 45 for the millennial, and an hour for the Gen X.
You're spot on with the Gen Xers. They need 60 minutes, and that's acceptable. No big deal. I certainly can't sit in a chair for 60 minutes anymore. I'm over it. But I'm a millennial, so 30 minutes is my max. So close, 30 minutes. But Gen Zers don't want more than a 20-minute session now. So I was recently at an event where they did a speaker showcase. They brought in 3 really dynamic speakers that were well-traveled, highly represented, and they gave each of them a 20-minute stand on a 1-hour session where you could listen to their 20-minute version of their keynote and decide, if I really like that keynote, I'm going to go to the 45-minute follow-up that they're going to offer in the breakouts after this. And I think that is a way to make everyone happy, right? Because the Gen Zer may sit there and say, I just saw all 3. I'm good. I don't really need more on any of these. That was as much as I needed on each. And now I'm going to go answer emails or call my, client back or do whatever. Where that, Gen Xer that is still in the room is going to get what they want out of that second session and maximize the time that they have connected to that particular industry expert or content creator of sorts. So that's another kind of interesting way to appeal to all 3 audiences.
Love that. Well, I think that's a really good one too. I mean, I like the idea of the 20-minute and then extending it to the longer. You get a little nugget, right? But then you're able to really dig in if you want to dig in. So I love that.
Absolutely. Let's talk about networking. Because a big thing with the younger generation is that they want to be in a position to network and they want to not make it hard on themselves to network. What I've heard is that 79% of Gen Zers prefer a quiet night than a big blowout party. And we are used to planning those big blowout parties. So how do we create the big blowout parties that Gen Zers want to attend? And I think that's all about networking and how to create networking moments throughout the event that are experiential and memorable and picture worthy and have a takeaway and are personalized, right? Those are all the things that we're hearing that they want. So when it comes to networking styles, based on this study, what would you say? There's 3 styles that are listed, and I want you to match them each with a generation. There is the app-based matching, social media connections, and business card exchange.
So I think I can get this one. I think it's business card exchange for the Gen X, social social media for the Gen Z, and then millennial wants app exchange.
You're 100% correct on that one. So you absolutely nailed it. Great job. And, another event I was at recently had an app-based exchange. And I noticed that the entire audience of the people that participated in it were millennials. I thought it was going to be more Gen Zers. I thought they were going to be interested in the kind of very purposeful small group conversations that the app kind of forced people into, that were live conversations, but they just connected you based on your interests and topics. But no, the Gen Zers weren't sitting there in that session. They were talking about the events and social media. They were going and doing the activity that was set up 20 feet away, where they got to have a takeaway and make a custom charm bar or whatever the offering was. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that can get a little bit confusing, right? Because app-based for social media, I mean, there is a big difference there. So what would you say is the group that is most interested in health-conscious food and beverage?
Oh, I think it has to be Gen Z.
Believe it or not, that one comes up under millennial. So the millennials are still saying that they want health conscious. What the Gen Zers want is diverse and custom options. I was talking to my coordinator earlier today, and I asked her, and we're talking about not just the food part, but also the beverages, because, her and I attend a lot of events together. And I noticed that she very rarely, she may have one glass of wine, but she very rarely has more than one glass of wine. And I remember when I was first in the networking scene, I was like 2-3 glasses of wine. Who wants to hang out for another drink after the event happens? I was really into the social part of the alcohol service. And, I asked her, would you be happier if they had mocktails? Would you be happier if they had, better options for non-alcoholic? Do you care if it's a full open bar or beer and wine? And she was like, I really just don't care that much. I'm happy with a soda water. It is what it is. What I care about is the food served. And I'm noticing that so many events that we get invited to are full of really unhealthy fried foods, things that really upset your stomach afterwards, things that you don't feel good about yourself after you've eaten. She said, I want to have food that I can't get at a menu at a restaurant. Food that I think is interesting and food that I want to learn about, right? So something maybe I've never had before, something that's got a really cool photo moment, something that's personalized for me. She said, I will have so much more interest in an event on the food. And she said, I want it to be healthy, but I really want it to be diverse and interesting and stuff that I think that I may not have access to if I didn't come to this event. So I thought that was kind of an interesting twist on the food and beverage conversation, because everyone's so focused on health conscious and, meatless Mondays and, plant-based offerings and things around mocktails, having 7 or 8 mocktail options. But maybe it's more just about how you're serving the items and making them things that people aren't used to seeing, so that they have more of a memory moment around the food and beverage experience.
I love that. It's really interesting.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more, and then we can go off this fun little topic we've been on here. But let's talk about wellness. Let's talk about wellness and sustainability.
Okay.
Which group believes that sustainability and wellness are deal breakers and the most highly important thing about that they consider about the event?
I think that has to be Gen Z.
You got it. So Gen Zers are, even if you think about it, we talked about our sustainability council in a recent episode, but the majority of our sustainability council is made up of Gen Z audience, right? They care more about the sustainability and how it's going to impact them. But then on the wellness elements, the Gen Xers are saying it's not a priority. If it's a heavy Gen X audience and you have a fun run, you're going to have a very low, audience of people that actually show up for it, even if they signed up for it the night before, because they care more about the open bar the night before. And then the millennials have some interest. They're definitely talking about it. And, they think the sustainability is an important factor to consider. But for Gen Zers, it's a deal breaker. And these things are highly important to them. And they are driving decisions about events around these topics. And I think that's something that as event organizers and as businesses, we need to think about more, because Gen Zers know if we're being authentic or not. We can't just say we're sustainable and not be sustainable, right? We can't just say we're offering wellness opportunities and not set aside chunks of time in the agenda, not just at 6 a.m., but throughout the agenda to think about moments where they can be more, focused on themselves, or maybe more comfortable in how they dress, because they don't want to be as buttoned up as the Gen Xers or the baby boomers for sure. And maybe they want to be able to wear the sneakers that they wear every day to the office at the conference as well, or, whatever makes them feel more comfortable and more themselves. Because to your point earlier, Ashley, it's about inclusion and diversity and being able to represent themselves however they are without having to follow the rules of this is what you need to wear and this is how you need to look and this is what you need to say when you walk in the door. So I thought those were some of my favorite takeaways about the differences in planning for those three generations. But tell me, Ashley, what else in your conversations with some different Gen Zers, what were they saying to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, one of the other things too, and this just comes to mind because my team is entirely made up of the Gen Z demographic, is, and you said it a minute ago, but that authenticity is just so important to them. And it's really recognizing and learning about them on a real granular level so that you can understand those authentic pieces of their story. I think it's, interesting. I think from a millennial perspective, we get on a call, we want to be efficient, we want to get through the agenda, we want to move on to the next thing, check it off our to-do list. And maybe that's also because I'm a little bit type A, but that tends to be my approach. Whereas when I'm really kind of digging into a project or understanding kind of kicking off something with an audience that is all Gen Z, they really want to have a moment to talk about what's going on in their lives, to tell you a story, to kind of relate and have this personal connection. It's so important. So I think as that translates into events too, it's again, having that personal connection, that personalization, that truly understanding who they are as people, not just on the surface level, but digging a little bit deeper. And that's really important. So I think that's something we can always incorporate into our events as well. And also as we work with the generation, just understanding that that's really valuable to them.
Yeah. And I think that actually from an authenticity standpoint, that ties into content around some of these events. And what the Gen Zers seem to be more interested in is the behind the scenes, the how did we get here in the planning of this event even, which I thought was kind of an interesting, they want short videos, right? They don't just want stagnant content on social media. They want video content. And so doing behind the scenes video content is what's most interesting to them. And think about that when you're promoting to a Gen Z audience for an event, but also as a destination management company, we have to think about that as to how we, attract the right Gen Zers into the workforce. To your point, Ashley, about working side by side, every day is like an event. And every, internal meeting that we have, we need to be planning appropriately for that audience as well, too. So, when we think about company culture and we think about some of the events that we plan for all different types of organizations, whether they're in any type of field that they're in, whether it's a summer outing or a holiday party, or it's a business meeting, a national sales meeting or a convention of sorts, how can we lean on these couple of things that we've talked about today to be better fit for the future of the workforce, right? So how can we do a better job of making sure that we have a lot of interactive things happening at the event with short activities, with take-home moments, with personalization? In a confession moment, I was planning an upcoming event and I was sitting there racking my brain, thinking, how can we make sure that the audience at this event walks away thinking, that was really cool, I can't wait to do another event with CSI. And I knew my audience was a younger audience in this particular case. And these were the next generation of event planners, right? And so I enlisted a group of 4 or 5 different Gen Zers from my team onto a brainstorming call, allowed us to all collaborate and create content that was going to make sense for that event. It was, 2 or 3 hours. It was not a huge amount of time to make a big impact. And where I would have said, okay, one, beautiful food display is enough. I no longer feel that way. We ended up doing a, watercolor artist where they did a custom watercolor picture of each of the guests. And, some of the girls that attended said, I still have that hanging up in my room. I actually put it in a frame, and I was so excited to get home to my roommates to say, look what I got today, and sort of show off how cool their job was. Right. We had a charm bar instead of, bracelet making or pick one of a gifting station. We used a local purveyor, and we gave them a choice of all different charms to build on a charm necklace or charm earrings, depending on what they like. So giving them options to personalize, add, their name or their initials to the charms. And they really liked that a lot. And then, on the AI side of it, we probably did 40 or 50 AI photo booth events this year. And the Gen Zers were saying to me, hey, we're kind of over that. Like, I know AI is cool and like the photo booths are cool. And maybe if you haven't seen it before, you still think they're cool. But there's so much more that AI is doing that's so much more interesting to us. That's more than just a photo that we walk away with where we sort of look like ourselves, but really don't. And, they commented on, they are so much more excited about hologram entranceways and the hologram moments around the tech forward moments and events, and how those were the things that they could put video content on instead of still content. And that's why it was more interesting to them. Right. So all of these themes keep coming back over and over again. And what I'm finding is if we don't have these conversations, if we don't include them in the conversation and be collaborative, we're going to miss the mark because we're only going to be targeting an audience that is no longer attending our events. So to kind of come full circle with how we started here, I just think that understanding the Gen Z demographic in your event and who are you trying to target and what are you trying to get it to accomplish at your event is so important. The other one that they mentioned that was something that they are all still talking about because it's all over TikTok is 3D printing. You set up a 3D printing station or even the AI drawing bots and things like that. They're all about using those as a take home for themselves and making their own TikTok content around them at the event. And guess what? That's good for you too, because they're talking about your event in a way that is trending. And that's what you want usually.
That's such a good point. I think that user generated content, Gen Z has that on lock. They know how important it is where they can become creators themselves and share their own content, based on what they're experiencing. One thing that stood out to me is Spotify did a Me Also Me campaign where users basically created and shared playlists that showcased their personalities. And I think having those moments where, we create events and we're really targeting that Gen Z, similar to what you just spoke about, and having them give that opportunity to create those, user generated content moments where they can, have these social proof of what they're doing. It obviously is going to boost consumer confidence across the board and get everyone excited and fired up about what we're doing as a company. It's a win-win for us. So I think any way we can kind of create events around that and have that moment where we know they're going to go home and share it on social media is really the goal, right? When we're working with Gen Z and creating events for them.
And with that, they like to figure out their own, guided experience through an event. They don't like to be told where to go, when, and how. They like a more self-guided moment where they can make their own decisions about the things that do interest them and make it more personalized. I was thinking about how for many years we had hand-printed maps of, the convention center or the event or whatever, welcome reception you were planning. And then we moved to digital maps and we had them on the app and you could see what was happening in the room and whatever. Maybe there was digital signage in different areas. Now people want to be able to touch those digital signs and walk their own way through them and make it interactive. Like you think about when you're at the airport and you're looking for where the food options are, right? You can go to a digital map and you can find the food. People want that at their events too, right? And that's what the future of, technology, when we think about, this audience, it's interactivity, it's self-guided, it's allowing them to make their own decisions. And guess what? The Gen Xers and the millennials are going to use it too. It's a value add for every generation to be able to have some of those more curated, custom, roadmaps that each event can, have happen for each attendee to be unique.
Yeah. And that's the goal, right? It's really about bridging those three generations, right? Because we know that that's going to be the shape and the makeup of the workforce moving forward. So any way we can kind of create for Gen Z, but also include the millennials and Gen X's to come along for the journey is where we need to go.
So in a recent event, we were trying to target an audience that was a very mix of the three different generations we're talking about, and even had a couple of baby boomers, including, the top person on the team. But we all know that Taylor Swift has really taken the stage when it comes to event experiences these days. And in a true event planner confession, we designed the whole event around a Taylor Swift concert. And because what we know about Taylor Swift's concert is that all generations want to be at her show. It is a community that she creates, and it is full of life and energy, and the memories that are made between multiple generations are what she is selling when she sells a ticket. And we created, even though it was a 45-person event, we created a Taylor Swift eras experience that allowed the different eras and generations to be connected, feel okay to be flashy, feel okay to have a disco ball drink in their hand, and to walk through, a snowman that was made out of disco, and a whole, wall of balloons that were interactive, and, stations where you could make personalized takeaways, and food that was served on conveyor belts, and all kinds of things that were full of texture, full of life, and full of energy. And while we didn't call it a Taylor Swift party, I think everybody that attended knew it was a Taylor Swift party.
What a way to encourage everyone to kind of come out and just embrace themselves, right? So I think that's so fun. And I'm assuming there were also some friendship bracelets exchanged at that event as well.
You know what? Friendship bracelets have been hot for a few years at events, and I encourage that. I think that those are a trend that's not going away. And there's an organization that we work with, which actually gives back to the local community, the Little Words Project, where the friendship bracelets actually help people in need. And now you're really touching on all the things that the Gen Zers are looking for when they're looking for an event activation. So
there you go. Well, I think this has been a really interesting conversation. And I think, it's something that we're going to continue to touch on no matter what the topic is how we're going to plan ahead for the generations that are up and coming. So it's exciting.
Absolutely. I look forward to the year ahead and seeing these Gen Zers out there and attending more of our events, and also coming up with new ways to continue to keep them all engaged.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I think, just a reminder, you guys make sure you send in your event planner confessions. We'd love to hear from you. Maybe tell us a little bit of a story of a time where you maybe had a win for planning for Gen Z, or maybe a lesson learned about how to provide a more inclusive and exciting experience for Gen Z at your events. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure you give us a call or drop us a DM, and we can share your event planner confessions live on the air.